Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes. And with me, as always, is my fellow person in the co-created environment, Mr. Ken Kelly. How you doing, Ken?
I'm well. I like that co-created environment. And I guess, how is that co-created? What is it that we create the environment that we live in and how we see it?
It's equally. It's a kind of quote or a piece of thinking from our friends in the TA world. Co-creative relationship is where both people are investing in the relationship for a good outcome. That's the shorthand. I'm in this for the good outcome. And of course, that good outcome is to bring great quality content to you, our listener. And today we've got a doozy. It's a new word for me. A doozy for you. That means good. It's slang. And we're going to be kicking off episode 37, looking at transference. And we touch on this from time to time, but we're going to be dipping into the Facebook group. We have got a comment there, a question there. And we're going to be looking at transference, how we can see that manifest itself, I guess, within our counselling relationships in the therapy room. Theory with Rory is one that I think a lot of people struggle with, and I know I struggled with this. And I say a lot of people, not because I'm generalizing, because I've heard this fed back by fellow learners, and that's unconditional positive regard, UPR, a key of person-centered theory, but tricky because very often we might think, well, how is unconditional positive regard? Does that mean we agree with what it is that they always say, Rory? Absolutely. And also, I know that some learners struggle with thinking that they've got to be non-judgmental in their entire lives. And I'm going to share a story about my conversation with a hacker who recently tried to hack my computer by phone. And I'll share you my non-unconditional positive regard response to him.
Yeah, that I'm excited to hear the story of the hacker and the non-UPR. And then we're going to be ending off with something that's quite topical at the moment, and that is small-scale research. During level 4 here in the United Kingdom, second year, learners are tasked with researching a topic, and a topic maybe of interest to them, doing some research around that and doing a professional presentation for their peers. And it's kind of that time of year where you may be looking at doing this, or maybe just done it, or in the throes of doing it right now. And Rory, you wrote a phenomenal guide called the Short Research Guide, which is available, of course, in the Counselling Study resource. If you remember, you can go and check that out. But we're going to kind of be talking about some of the ideas surrounding that.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. I wrote a small book called Rory's Easy Research, and as Ken says, it's available in the Counselling Study resource. And effectively, small-scale research, it may be level 4. I know in level 4 qualifications there's a research module. In level 5 there's research modules, and they're usually small scale. In other words, you're given 6 or 8 weeks to do a bit of research, then you have to present it to your peers. And I'm going to be talking about how to scale that research so you don't drive yourself crazy getting so much information that you can't do anything with it, or overstretch yourself so that you feel that you've not got anywhere and the time's running out. So it really is all about scale. The clue is going to be about scale, I think, on that.
Like it, and good quality content coming up there. But let's kick off with that bit of a debate about transference and within the therapeutic relationship. And you mentioned, Rory, that this came in from a Facebook question.
Yeah, so we're grateful for Susan Wilson. So thanks, Susan Wilson. She's a member of our Facebook group. And if you want to join our Facebook group, and it's getting towards 5,000 members now, Ken. Can you believe that? 5,000. Way. Then go to counsellingtutor.com. Now, there's 2 L's in counselling. We spell it the UK English British way. And click on the tab on the right-hand side, and it says Facebook group. Hit that. And it's a closed group. Knock on the door, we'll let you in, and you can join all the other students of counselling and psychotherapy throughout the world, not just in the UK, who are studying counselling and psychotherapy. Alternatively, you can just go into Facebook, put Counselling Tutoring, again with the 2 L's, you'll find our group and do the same thing. And we're grateful for Susan because she's posed a very interesting question. How do you deal with transference in the therapy room? What happens if the client is seeing you as someone from their past, Ken?
Oh, Yes, and it's a really interesting topic. And the interesting thing, and it comes up again, transference comes up again and again and again. And here's what I know. If you're studying to be a counsellor, psychotherapist, or you're in practice, or you're going to be in practice, you're going to come across transference and countertransference. It's part of what we do. And it can sometimes be invisible. It can sometimes be a bit tricky to spot. So what might we look out for, Rory? How can you... Well, I guess first, let's define what it is.
Well, transference is where you meet somebody new for the first time and you attribute to them issues or behaviours or fantasies what you've got from someone from the past. So how many times have we met someone for the first time and they've gone, oh, you look like my Uncle Albert? That's transference.
Yeah.
Now, on a very kind of surface level, that happens all the time. You look like that guy off the television. But the difficulty is that what happens is when we see someone and we think of someone from our past, we bring all those feelings, behaviours, and the whole history of that relationship into a new relationship. Yeah. And that's dangerous because we're not seeing the person for who they are. And countertransference is where that person then reacts as if it was that person in their past. So an example is you meet someone who looks like your school teacher. They're not your school teacher. The school teacher may be that you had a bad experience with. What happens is that then you start reacting like that child to the person. And it distorts the relationship. You're not seeing the person in front of you as a new person, independent of all the independent ideas they have. And you're reacting to someone in your past. So they're seeing you reacting to someone who's not them. Very, very confusing.
That's a really good explanation of it. And I remember when I studied this, and I'm very grateful, Rory, because I studied under you and you explained transference and countertransference, and I really struggled with it in the beginning because it's sometimes difficult to just get the thread of what it is. And the best way that I can explain it is transference is when you meet someone, and you think, oh, I don't know what it is, but there's something about that person that I don't like. Or I don't know what it is, but that person brings up a funny feeling within me. So they don't have to look like somebody that you recognize from your past, although that is, of course, a great glowing example of transference. It can be as subtle as a small feeling within that you just, that person makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't know what it is, but whenever I go in to speak with that person, I go in saying, I'm going to say this, this, and this, but when I get in there, I can't say it, and I feel like a little child. Examples of transference. Exactly.
Many years ago, I can remember teaching a student who was quite challenging to me, and the child of this person was very much in the room. In other words, they were quite childlike. And one day as the class finished, this learner hung around after the class. She said, can I have a word with you, Rory? And I said, yes. And she said, Rory, you remind me of my dad. And I said, okay, sit down, take a seat. So I said, tell me about that. And she said, you've got quite a big laugh. And I said, okay. And she said, you tell rubbish jokes. And I said, yeah, that's true. And she said, also, you're a very big fellow. And I said, yep, I am. And I said, what else? And there was a pause. And she said, my dad used to say I was rubbish. And I said, have I ever said that you're a rubbish person? And she said, no. And I said, that's because, and this is the lesson, I'm not your dad.
Yeah. Transference squashed. One foul swoop.
One foul swoop. And the interesting thing about it was that because of the child behaviour, because the child was very much in the room, this person's child personality was in the room, I had to be very thoughtful that I didn't go around as a father and say, look, sit down and be quiet. Do what you're told. And, children should be seen, not heard. And I've got to be honest, Ken, my boundaries were pushed, my buttons were pushed. But because I knew that it was transference, and here's the key thing, because I understood there was a transferential element, I could see it. It was just a case of realising and waiting until the opportunity came up. And if she hadn't spoken to me, I would have spoken to her.
So you by understanding what transference was, you avoided the trap of countertransference, which is when we act inappropriately to the transference that they're projecting. So if you started saying those things, all children shouldn't, and playing the part of that parental figure, that's the countertransference. And when that becomes invisible within your therapy room and it is not seen by you or your client, it ceases to be therapy, because it is not you and that person there. It is those people from the past that are transacting, and it can't be a healthy therapeutic environment. And this is why a good supervisor will question you and examine your relationships with your clients and really look for that transference. So transference is, who are you, the counsellor, to that client? Who do they see you as? Do they see you as a father figure, a person in power, somebody from their past, one of those men? We all know what men are like. I'm saying that, of course, in inverted commas. How do they see you? Because that is where transference starts. It's the seed. Yeah.
And in therapy, sometimes that becomes apparent when a client starts to act out in the therapy room, starts to, there's a term in our friends in the TA community, and it's universal. When the child personality of the client's in the room, where they're acting in a childish way, or maybe they may even start to talk to you as if you're more known to them than you really are. So they're being very familiar, and if I pick that up, I've seen this on a number of occasions through my career, and as you say, work with it through supervision. What I tend to do is just very gently say to the client, "Do I remind you of anybody?"
Yes.
And just wait. And you might not get an answer there and then. That's the key thing. And then the client might come back in a bit and go, "Well, actually, you remind me of my..."
Yeah.
And then you can say, "Well, I understand that, but I'm not your..." whatever it is, dad, ex-lover, teacher. Yeah.
And so is that what you would suggest in how to work with transference, is to maybe ask, watch out for those telltale signs, I guess, those clues, and then maybe challenge the client on that. And when you get something out, when they say, "Actually, you do look a bit like my uncle, that whatever, that you can then put in, "I'm not your uncle."
Yeah. I'm not that. And I think that one of the key ways of identifying if there's transference in the room is if your behaviour starts to alter. If you feel that you're becoming over-parental. Yeah. Or the other side of it is that if you're becoming very childish.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden you feel very giddy and childlike with your client, and you're not in an adult place, if it's not an adult-to-adult relationship, then almost certainly I would say that there's some transference going on. It happens all the time, transference, but it's when it becomes difficult to manage and the relationship becomes skewed.
And I like that you put in there that it happened all the time, because empathy, I guess, is a form of transference, because we are seeing it through the eyes of that person. It's tricky. And I guess that there's some great resources. I'm just going to refer to them now. One is on the subject of erotic or eroticized transference. And you can hear more about that. Rory and I covered that in episode 21 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. And then if you go right back to the early days, I think it's episode 3 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast, we did quite an in-depth look at transference and countertransference. So you can get more information of that. And of course, that's easy to find. You just go to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab. It's going to give you all our past podcasts. You can kind of just scroll through there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason we keep coming back to transference is because it's something that happens a lot in the therapy room, and it happens at different times, and it's something that comes up time and time again in our Facebook page. The students on our Facebook page are mentioning it.
Yep.
Not all the time, but it's a recurring theme. Yeah,
and I guess recurring in that it will come up again and again. Therefore, really good to refresh your memory on it from time to time, and to always be vigilant, to be on the lookout within your counselling relationship, because the counselling relationship kind of harbours, it encourages transference and countertransference because of the closeness of the relationship, I guess. And people may well relate that closeness to other relationships they've had where they were also close. And so it is the ground where it can live. interesting, and I think that this is a topic that needs to be discussed more. Please pop onto the Facebook page, get the thread going there. We want to hear your thoughts on transference. Have you ever felt it within a relationship that you had? And of course, remember, don't mention client stuff. We cannot have client stuff on the Facebook page. But if you have had any experience of transference or countertransference that you felt, you can maybe say it in a roundabout way without mentioning clients or their material.
Absolutely. And yes, it does come up. And one final plea, if you like, is that sometimes the transference will be where the client is reminded, the client sees you and you remind them of someone in their past. Yeah. And you've got to be very, very, very careful of that. And the best way of dealing with it, as always, if you feel that there's some transferential stuff going on, or you're heading towards, as my good friend Bob Cook says, a transferential mire, which I always like that, where you both mire, you're completely stuck, is to take it to supervision.
Agreed.
Work through in supervision and have a clear idea when you come out of how you're going to work with the client.
Just again, we keep on coming back to the importance of having supervision and a good supervisor and being able to take your material into supervision. It's what we do. It's reflective practitionership, I guess. Moving on from the transference, transferring over, see what I did there, Rory, to theory with Rory, and a topic that can be tricky. It's that unconditional positive regard. How can I look at all my clients without any form of judgment whatsoever? Is it possible to do that?
Well, as I'm going to explore in the theory with Rory section, it is a big ask. And I think it's one of the things that students kind of struggle with. And also I think there's a kind of urban legend that person-centered therapists, or anybody who's a therapist, has to be non-judgmental in not only just in the therapy room, but in all their lives. And as I'll explain after the phone call I had a few weeks ago, sometimes you have to make a judgment, and it's the term judgment that gives us all the problems. And I'm going to be talking about that, and also I'm going to be giving a free handout on the website, just talking about 3 tips on UPR. Very simple, 3 tips on UPR. If you go down to our mother website where the podcasts are hosted, they're hosted on iTunes, but they're also hosted on our website at counsellingtutor.com. If you hit that episode 37, you'll see that you can download my 3 tips on UPR.
Without any further ado, it's Theory with Rory.
Counselling Theory with Rory Lees-Oakes.
A few months ago, I received a phone call. The person on the other end of the phone said they were from Microsoft. They told me my computer had a virus, that they could get rid of it, and all I would need to do is give them access to the computer for a few minutes and they'd remove the virus. Now, I have a technical background, so luckily enough, I understood that the person on the other end of the phone was in fact a scammer. He was trying to get access to my computer so he could either lock it with a virus and charge me to unlock it, or maybe try and find bank details so he could rob my bank and steal from me. I have to say that I was quite angry at this, and I may have intimated to him that his parents weren't married. We'll leave it at that because this is a family podcast. I was angry, I was shaken, and if I'm honest, a little frightened. It's not every day that you talk to someone who is actively in the process of trying to steal from you. A few weeks later, I sat down and thought about this. Had I been judgmental? Absolutely. Had I offered any unconditional positive regard to the person on the other end of the phone? Not a drop. And it struck me that what I'd done was I had only seen that part of the person that I didn't like and acted on it. It then struck me that sometimes that can happen with clients. If we're not fully aware of what unconditional positive regard is, we may only value the parts of the client we like and completely dismiss or even judge the parts of the clients we don't. Carl Rogers came up with the idea of unconditional positive regard in the 1957 Journal of Psychology, and he called it the necessary and sufficient conditions. There were 6, and unconditional positive regard, he writes, to the extent that the therapist finds himself experiencing a warm acceptance of each aspect of the client's experience as being part of that client, he is experiencing unconditional positive regard. It means that there are no conditions of acceptance, no feeling of, I like you only for you and thus and so, it means a prizing of the person. It is at the opposite pole from the selective evaluating attitude. You are bad in these ways, good in those. It involves as much feeling of acceptance for the client's expression of negative, bad, painful, fearful, defensive, abnormal feelings as for his expression of good, positive, mature, confident social feelings, as much acceptance of ways in which he is inconsistent as ways of which he is consistent. It means caring for the client, but not in a possessive way or in such a way as simply to satisfy the therapist's own needs. It means a caring for the client as a separate person with permission to have his own feelings, his own experiences. Rogers goes on to describe one client who says, fostering my possession of my own experience, that is my experience, and that is what I actually am having, thinking what I think, feeling what I feel, wanting what I want, fearing what I fear, no ifs, no buts, or not really. This is a type of acceptance which is hypothesised as being necessary if personality changes to occur. It's a really big ask, and in fact, it's one that Rogers struggled with himself. There's a film of him being interviewed, and I'm going to put this on the Mother page at www.counsellingtutor.com. So just go to this episode and you'll see the video. And Rogers talks of his experience when he was in Rhodesia in South Africa under the apartheid regime. And he met and worked with a Rhodesian officer in the army, an army officer. And Rogers says, without any fear at all, he says, I wasn't sure that given my feelings about apartheid and the way, the army were treating the black population, that I could offer unconditional positive regard to this person. So it struck me that even Rogers thought it could be a big ask at sometimes. He went on to say that he tried his best, and the officer he was working with fed back to him that he felt accepted and felt that some change had occurred. So I thought to myself, well, even if Rogers has trouble with it, it allows therapists like ourselves to be human. So I've come up with 3 tips or observations that might be useful when you're working with a client who has really different views to you. The first one is, don't just accept the parts of the client you like. Part of us is being a mirror, reflecting back what the client's saying. And in person-centered therapy, what they're saying is all they're saying. So if they're saying things that are not nice or that you disagree with, homophobic, racist, that type of thing, that's their words, that's their experience, and we need to reflect that back. What we shouldn't do is try to audit them or correct them. Clients have differing opinions from yours. There's an often misquoted saying that's attributed to Voltaire, and Voltaire didn't say it. It was written in a book called The Friends of Voltaire, which was his biography. And Voltaire was a philosopher. And the quote is, I may not agree with what you say, but I defend your right to say it upon death. In other words, what Voltaire was purportedly saying was that free speech is free and it should be allowed to be free. And sometimes when we work with clients, clients will say things that are totally opposite to what we believe, totally challenging of our value systems. And, that is something that we have to work with. And if it's difficult, we really, really should take that to our supervisor. And finally, it's not up to you to change the client's worldview. We're there to offer therapy. We're there for them to make sense of their world and to start the process of self-healing. We're not there as what I would call agents of social control, to say to clients, that's wrong, that's the wrong thinking, this is the thinking you should be doing. You shouldn't be thinking like that. Because all that will happen is that clients will not be able to integrate into the relationship. So just reflecting on that podcast or this my little discussion, is it a big ask for therapists? I'd really be interested when this podcast goes live, if you give me your views in the Facebook feed. Is it difficult to offer unconditional positive regard to someone who's got really different views to you? And if so, how do you work with that?
I love how unconditional positive regard can be tied into a potential hacker of your system, Rory. But it seems that the UPR was kind of maybe turned down slightly when you were giving that reply. But what I did like about what you shared there is how it's about seeing the person when we're in a therapy room, and we are there to present that unconditional positive regard. And it's seeing the person as a fellow human being who is maybe a result of the road that they have walked. And yes, they may have done things or maybe even be doing things that we don't agree with, but that doesn't belittle them as a person. We still see them as the person that they are, I guess.
Yes, and never, as I mentioned in the theory section, never a truer phrase than separating the sin from the sinner.
And go straight away now. Go on to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab, scroll down, episode number 37, and go and download those tips to UPR. That's really handy because we write about UPR again and again and again in our assignments. Have it on hand. Moving on, talking about assignments, part of being a practitioner, if you're training in the UK, counselling, psychotherapy, you're going to be asked to do a small-scale research project, and it can be tricky. It can bring up a lot of nerves because maybe you have to, part of this is standing up and doing a presentation of the information that you have discovered while doing your research. It's about where do you go to get the right information for your research? How do you bring that together? What do you put in? What do you leave out? And Rory, you wrote a book, a really helpful book. We've had so much feedback on your book. Can you kind of maybe share a couple of topics from that?
Yeah, well, I wrote a book called Rory's Easy Research because I'd spent, at the time, I think it was about 7 or 8 years, working with students who were presenting research, and I could see some of the muddles and some of the stress that they were getting into. And I wrote it really for my students, just to say, look, this is a guide to producing a small-scale research project. And the clue, Ken, is in the name, small scale. Before I left teaching, I recently spoke to a learner who'd wrote to the Carl Rogers Archives in America and was really frustrated. She hadn't got the right information back. And I sat her down and I said, very laudable as it is to try and get this information, I think it's about being realistic. It's really about 8 weeks of the presentation. Yeah. And within that 8 weeks, it's a small scale research project. And I think some of the pitfalls are that either people are over ambitious with their research, and they decide they're going to this massive research project, which probably someone doing a PhD would struggle with, quite frankly. There's so many people to write to, so much you only have a small time to do it. And also, I think a lot of people get a bit frightened about standing in front of the peers and tutors, giving the information out. And I'll share with you, Ken, I still have every single presentation that my peers did on my diploma course. It's in a box upstairs. And time to time, I'll nip up there because, the studio's getting fuller and fuller nowadays. And some of the stuff is still relevant. And that was 14 years ago. Wow. And I can remember one particular presentation that was done by one of my students on the use of alcohol. And I was so taken with it, I actually gave up drinking because of it. I decided to become teetotal. And it was an incredible presentation. And, the people who are listening to this, if you're a diploma student, you are at the cutting edge of your profession. You're in the arc of your learning. And you're the people who are making the difference. You're the people who are going out with fresh eyes and a fresh approach and saying, look at this. This has changed. And I don't know about you, Ken, but it was one of the highlights of the 2 years, sitting, watching the students just on the cusp of graduating, presenting their information. And I used to love it. Free CPD, Ken.
It is, definitely. And I remember watching my peers presenting and watching these presentations when I was a tutor myself. And there's so much learning in there. And you're right. And there's still bits that are with me in my practice today, bits that I found really, really interesting. I've just looked very recently at somebody's presentation that they've only just submitted, and they shared it on our group. It's available in the Counselling Tutor Facebook group, and that's on protection, on looking after ourselves, on as counsellors, and it's just so important. But it can bring up fear. It can bring up fear when it's what do I research? How do I research it? And one of the things that I really appreciate from your book is you speak about having smart targets. And I think that kind of defines it down, and it gives you a framework to work within. And speaking about smart targets, S is for specific, M is for measurable, A is for agreed, realistic, time-bound, and ethical and recorded. So you've got that, and I think we can make that available as well in this episode, just that smart target list, because it's really helpful when you're planning. It kind of gives you a framework or a guideline to work within. If you are a member of the Counselling Study Resource, you can download that straight away. Just click into the Counselling Study Resource dashboard on your right-hand side. Just go to the link that is in the right-hand menu, and it's called Research and Presentations, and you'll be able to find it there. But otherwise, we'll make it available if you're not a member of the CSR on this episode 37. Just go to counsellingtutor.com, podcast tab, episode 37. We'll make that downloadable. So 2 downloads in today's episode.
Yeah, fantastic, Ken. Absolutely fantastic. And yeah, as far as research goes, it's well worth thinking before you start. Without a goal, you can't score.
That's it.
Simple as that. And, also I'd say if you're thinking of doing research, maybe you're in your first year, and maybe you're listening to this, you're thinking, next year I'm going to be asked to do some research, because the second years, at the time this podcast goes out, we'll already be doing it.
Yeah.
It might be worth thinking, what do I really care about? What interests me? And just start kind of having a bit of a think when you've got a couple of minutes. And I know a couple of minutes is a premium when you're studying counselling. It feels like you can't sleep sometimes. But just think about what really interests me. Start taking a few jottings, maybe get a jotter and just jot a few things down. And it's amazing what you can find. And, what I would say as we kind of come to the end of this section is you don't have to be an academic to be a researcher. A lot of people think researchers wear kind of tweed jackets with leather armbands on. And
I've got the picture in my head here, Rory. I can see this person. This is transference, isn't it? This is what you were talking about.
Wear mortarboards and smoke pipes and maybe talking a slightly contrived Oxford accent, which, if you have an Oxford accent and you're listening, there's nothing wrong with that. It's the contrived I have the difficulty with.
Yes.
And you don't have to be. Research is simply looking at what someone else has written and then going out and finding out for yourself.
Yes.
And does your findings match that person's? And if that's the case, then, okay, so you've proved what was written is right. But if it's wrong, or if it's different, then the next question you need to ask yourself is, where next? Where next?
And I love that, because what you're basically saying there, and you've said this before, and I absolutely love it, is that the best questions don't lead to good answers. They just lead to better questions.
You do.
That's what research is about. And you're speaking there, there's 2 different kinds of research, and there's primary research and secondary research.
Yes.
And my understanding is that primary research is something that you undertake to find out yourself. But secondary research is reading what somebody else has maybe done and looking at how that fits into what you're studying as well.
Absolutely. So you find out what people already know, and then you then go out and you then research and see if your research matches up with what's already in the public domain, or is it different? It's as simple as that. And I think one of the things to really get a handle on is that our profession is based on us looking for the change. It's not stuck in the 1950s or the 1960s. Research is a living, breathing heart of our profession. Yeah. We don't just sit there and say, well, that's how it's always been, so it must be that way. Research is the oxygen of counselling, because our clients deserve to have, the very best attention. And if we can do that by something we found in research, then we're in the service of the clients always.
Agreed. And then what an exciting time if you've got a research project coming up. What are the topics that interest you? Why not pop onto the Facebook group and share some ideas, maybe get some feedback, maybe get some resource links from fellow peers. I'd certainly love to read about what you're interested in. And research links are a whole topic on their own, aren't they? Don't go to Wikipedia for your research information. No. Make sure you're going to a pure source. And again, I can't speak about this topic without mentioning Rory's research guide, because that contains a whole pile of links. It contains information on the presentation itself and how you can present that, secondary research, primary research, ways of working checklists, research foundations, effective research presentations. It's all there. So if you are a member of the Counselling Study Resource, just log in, right-hand side, click on that link and go and have a look at that. I
think there's about 120 links to authority websites. I spent the whole of the summer holidays putting it together, because at the time our college didn't have access to Athens, which is an academic database. So I made a PDF file with 120 links, alphabetical, so whatever you're researching, and even split it to adults and children. And you can just go in and you go to the websites, which are authority websites, which carry the research. So you could just search through it and find information. So there we go, click through. Rory's Easy Research.
Like it indeed. What an episode. Episode 37 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast started off by speaking about an old friend, Transference, and bordering on Countertransference, having a look at that, into theory with Rory with unconditional positive regards, the challenges that brings up, and how when your computer is hacked, UPR gets turned off. And of course, we ended off with speaking about research, small research projects for counsellors, psychotherapists, maybe at level 4 in the UK. Wow, what an episode, full of value.
Indeed. And if you're listening out there, as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.